The fever had taken her 3 miles outside Lewiston, Idaho, where the prairie grass grew tall enough to hide a woman's fall from her horse. And if William Jonas hadn't been tracking that wounded elk through the September heat of 1882, she would have died there with no one knowing her name. He saw the horse first, a chestnut mare standing riderless near a cluster of cottonwoods, reins dragging in the dust. William pulled his own mount to a stop and dismounted slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward the revolver at his hip. The war had taught him caution, even 15 years after Appomattox. But there was no ambush waiting, no outlaws or hostile raiding parties. Just a woman lying in the grass, her traveling dress soaked through with sweat, her dark hair matted against a face burning with fever. He knelt beside her and touched the back of his hand to her forehead. The heat radiating from her skin made him pull back. This was no ordinary illness. He had seen fever like this before, during the war, and he knew what happened to people when it took hold and kept burning. They died, usually within a week if they were lucky, longer if they were not. William looked around at the empty landscape. The nearest town was Lewiston, back the way he had come. His own place, a small ranch he had built with his own hands over the past 8 years, was closer, maybe 2 miles northeast. He made his decision in the time it took him to stand and walk to her horse. He would take her to his ranch. She would not survive the longer journey to town, not in this heat, not with that fever eating her alive from the inside. Getting her onto his horse took effort. She was unconscious, completely dead weight in his arms, and he was not a large man despite his strength. William stood just under 6 feet, lean from years of hard work and harder living. His hands were calloused, his face weathered by sun and wind until he looked older than his 32 years. But he managed to lift her, managed to mount his horse with her draped across his lap, managed to lead her mare behind as he rode toward home. The ranch house was small, just 3 rooms he had built from timber he had cut and hauled himself. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a bedroom barely large enough for his narrow bed, and a storage room where he kept supplies. He carried the woman inside and laid her on his bed, the only bed in the house. Then he went to work. He had a well out back, good clean water that ran cold even in summer. He hauled up bucket after bucket, soaking cloths in the frigid water and laying them across her forehead, her neck, her wrists. The fever was relentless. As soon as one cloth grew warm from her skin, he replaced it with another. He did this for hours, through the afternoon and into the evening, stopping only to light lamps when darkness fell and to check on the horses he had stabled in his small barn. The woman never woke. She moaned sometimes, twisted restlessly on the bed, mumbled words he could not understand. Once she cried out, a sharp sound of pain or fear that made him move faster, wringing out another cold cloth and pressing it gently to her burning skin. He wondered who she was, where she had been going, whether anyone was looking for her. Her dress was well made, not expensive but not cheap either. She wore no wedding ring. A leather satchel had been tied to her saddle and he had brought it inside, but he had not opened it. That felt like a violation somehow, going through her things while she lay helpless. The first night was the worst. Her fever spiked near midnight, and William honestly thought she would die. Her breathing grew rapid and shallow, her skin so hot it seemed impossible that a human body could sustain such heat. He pulled off the quilts, left her in just her thin cotton chemise, and covered every inch of exposed skin with wet cloths. He knelt beside the bed and prayed, though he was not much of a praying man anymore. The war had taken that from him along with so much else. But he prayed anyway, because this woman, this stranger, did not deserve to die alone in the house of a man whose name she did not even know. Somewhere near dawn, the fever broke slightly. Not much, but enough that her breathing eased and the terrible heat in her skin diminished to merely dangerous instead of deadly. William allowed himself to hope. He made coffee, drank it standing at the window watching the sun rise over the Idaho hills, then went back to his vigil. The pattern continued through the second day. Wet cloths, cold water, constant attention. He tried to get water between her lips, and sometimes she swallowed reflexively. That was good. Dehydration would kill her as surely as the fever itself. He made broth from dried beef and managed to spoon a little into her mouth. Most of it ran down her chin, but some of it went down her throat. He counted that as a victory. By the third day, William had not slept more than a few hours total. He dozed in the chair beside the bed, jerking awake whenever she stirred. His own body ached from exhaustion, but he could not stop. Would not stop. Something about this woman, this stranger, had awakened something in him that he thought had died in the war. A sense of purpose, maybe. Or just the simple human need to save a life when so many lives had been lost. He talked to her sometimes, during those long hours. Told her about the ranch, about the cattle he was trying to raise, about the hard winters and the dry summers. He told her about the town, about Lewiston with its lumber mills and steamboat landing on the Snake River. He did not tell her about the war, about the things he had seen and done. That was not fit conversation for anyone, let alone an unconscious woman fighting for her life. The fourth day brought no significant change. The fever remained high but steady. William continued his work with the wet cloths, his hands moving automatically now, changing them every few minutes, keeping her as cool as possible. He had gone through his entire supply of clean cloths and had to wash them in the yard, hanging them to dry in the hot sun before using them again. It was on the fifth day that he noticed the small details about her face. The way her eyebrows arched slightly higher on the left than the right. The small scar on her chin, barely visible. The fullness of her lower lip. She was beautiful, he realized, though he felt guilty for noticing such things when she lay so ill. But it was impossible not to notice, spending every waking hour staring at her face, monitoring her breathing, watching for any sign of change. The sixth day was when things began to shift. Her fever dropped noticeably in the afternoon. Not gone, but lower than it had been since he found her. She seemed to rest more peacefully, her breathing deeper and more regular. William felt the knot of tension in his chest ease slightly. She might survive this. She might actually survive. On the seventh day, she opened her eyes for the first time. It was only for a moment, and William was not sure she actually saw anything. Her eyes were a deep brown, almost black in the dim lamplight. They focused on nothing, glazed with fever and confusion. Then they closed again and she slipped back into unconsciousness. But it was progress. It was hope. The eighth day passed much like the seventh. She stirred more often now, turned her head when he pressed the wet cloths to her skin. Once, she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her fingers wrapping around his arm as if trying to anchor herself to something solid. He let her hold on, continuing to work with his other hand, and eventually her grip loosened and fell away. By the ninth day, William was beginning to think clearly again through his own exhaustion. He needed supplies, needed more than the limited provisions in his storage room. But he could not leave her alone. What if the fever spiked again? What if she woke disoriented and hurt herself? He decided to wait one more day. If she continued to improve, he could risk a quick trip to town. But late in the afternoon of the ninth day, everything changed. William was sitting beside the bed, wringing out another cloth in the basin of cold water. He heard a small sound, different from the moans and mumbles of the previous days. A word or the beginning of one. He looked up and found her eyes open, truly open this time, focused and aware. She stared at him for a long moment, her expression confused but alert. Her lips moved, dry and cracked despite his efforts to keep her hydrated. He reached for the cup of water he kept on the bedside table and lifted her head carefully, bringing the cup to her mouth. She drank just a few sips, then turned her head away. "Where am I?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible. "My ranch outside Lewiston," William said. His own voice sounded strange to him, rough from days of little use. "I found you on the prairie 9 days ago. You had a fever." She closed her eyes, absorbing this information. 9 days. "Yes, madam." Her eyes opened again, focusing on his face with an intensity that made him suddenly aware of how he must look. He had not shaved in 9 days, had barely washed except to splash water on his face. His clothes were rumpled and stained with water and sweat. "What is your name?" she asked. The question was so simple, so ordinary, but it hit him with unexpected force. 9 days he had cared for her, kept her alive, and she did not know his name. Had not known who held the wet cloths to her burning skin, who spooned water and broth between her lips, who prayed over her in the darkest hours of the night. "William Jonas," he said. "Most folks call me Will." She nodded slightly, the movement seeming to exhaust her. Her eyes began to close again. "Wait," he said. "What is your name?" "Sophia," she whispered. "Sophia Vance." Then she was asleep again, but it was different now. Not the unconscious stupor of fever, but real sleep. William sat back in his chair and released a breath he had not realized he was holding. Sophia Vance. Now the stranger had a name. She slept through the night and into the next morning. When she woke again, the fever was gone. William checked her forehead with the back of his hand, then checked again to be sure. Cool. Not cold, but normal. The fever had broken completely. "How do you feel?" he asked. Sophia blinked up at him, more alert now than she had been the previous day. "Weak," she said, "and confused." "You said 9 days." "Yes, madam. I do not remember any of it." She tried to sit up, but her arms gave out immediately. William caught her shoulders, easing her back down onto the pillows. "You need to rest. The fever took a lot out of you. I need to understand what happened." She looked around the room, taking in the rough wooden walls, the simple furnishings. "How did I get here?" William pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. "I found you out on the prairie. You had fallen from your horse. You were already burning with fever when I came across you." "I remember the fever starting," Sophia said slowly. "I was riding from Boys heading to Lewiston. I felt ill in the morning but thought it was just the heat. By afternoon I could barely stay in the saddle after that." She shook her head. "Nothing, just fragments, heat and cold, darkness. And sometimes a voice, but I could not make out the words." "I talk to you sometimes," William admitted. "Figured it might help hearing a voice. You took care of me all this time?" "Yes, madam." "Alone?" "Yes, madam, just me here." She looked at him for a long moment, and he could not read the expression in her dark eyes. Then she said, "Thank you, you saved my life. Could not very well leave you to die. Many men would have." She tried to sit up again, and this time William helped her, propping pillows behind her back. The movement exhausted her, and she leaned back with a sigh. "I must have been a considerable trouble." "No trouble," William said, and meant it. The exhaustion, the worry, the long hours of work, none of it seemed like trouble now that she was awake and recovering. "Are you hungry?" "I have broth, and I could make some cornbread." "Broth sounds good. Thank you." William went to the main room and ladled broth from the pot he kept simmering on the stove. When he returned, Sophia was looking down at herself, seeming to notice for the first time that she wore only her chemise. "My dress?" she asked, a flush rising in her cheeks. "Had to take it off," William said, trying to keep his voice matter of fact. "The fever was too high. It is hanging in the other room, washed and dried. Your things are there too, the bag from your horse. You undressed me." It was not quite a question, not quite an accusation. "Yes, madam, was not anything improper about it. You were dying, needed to cool you down." She looked at him again with that unreadable expression, then nodded. "Of course, I apologize. I did not mean to suggest anything inappropriate. You saved my life. I have no right to question your methods." William handed her the bowl of broth, but her hands were shaking too much to hold it. He sat on the edge of the bed and spooned the broth to her lips, the way he had done countless times while she was unconscious. She ate slowly, a dozen spoonfuls before she turned her head away. "That is all I can manage. It is enough for now. You will build your strength back gradually." "How long before I can travel?" The question surprised him, though it should not have. Of course she would want to leave to return to her own life. She had nearly died out here in the wilderness. Why would she want to stay? "A week at least," he said. "Maybe 2. You are very weak still." Sophia nodded, but he could see the frustration in her eyes. "I was supposed to be in Lewiston days ago. People will be worried." "Were you expected by someone in particular, my brother? He lives in Lewiston. I was coming to stay with him and his wife." She paused. "He will think something terrible has happened to me. As soon as you are strong enough to be alone for a few hours, I can ride into town and get word to him." "Would you?" Relief flooded her face. "His name is Samuel Vance. He runs the general store on Main Street." "I know the place," William said. "I will go tomorrow if you are feeling well enough." "Thank you." She settled back against the pillows, her eyelids already drooping. "I am so tired. Sleep. It is the best thing for you now." She was asleep within minutes. William took the bowl back to the kitchen and stood looking out the window at the afternoon sun. Tomorrow he would ride to Lewiston and inform Samuel Vance that his sister was alive and recovering. And after that, after she regained her strength, she would leave. She would go to her brother's house and resume whatever life she had planned. And he would return to his solitary existence on this ranch, alone as he had been for 8 years. The thought should not have bothered him as much as it did. The next day, Sophia insisted she was well enough to be left alone. She was still weak, could barely stand without assistance, but her mind was clear and the fever showed no signs of returning. William helped her into her dress, turning his back while she struggled with the buttons, then settled her in the chair in the main room where she could look out the window. "I will be gone a few hours at most," he said. "There is water here and bread if you get hungry. Do not try to walk around on your own. You will fall." "I will be fine," Sophia assured him. "Please just go tell my brother I am alive." William rode into Lewiston at a steady pace, the early morning air cool against his face. The town had grown considerably since he had first arrived in Idaho Territory 14 years ago. The steamboat landing brought regular traffic up the Snake River, and the gold rush in the mountains had drawn people from all over the country. Lewiston was a real town now, with churches and schools and even a newspaper. He found the general store without difficulty. It was a substantial building, 2 stories tall, with living quarters above the shop. A bell jingled when he walked in. The man behind the counter looked up and William could see the family resemblance immediately. Samuel Vance had the same dark eyes as his sister, the same strong features. "Help you?" Samuel asked. "Are you Samuel Vance?" "I am." "My name is William Jonas. I have news about your sister." Samuel's face went pale. "Sophia, is she alive?" "She is alive and recovering at my ranch. She was very ill, but the fever has broken." "Thank God." Samuel came around the counter. "Tell me everything." William explained finding Sophia on the prairie, the 9 days of fever, her waking yesterday. Samuel listened intently, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. "I need to see her," Samuel said when William finished. "Can you take me there, of course? But she is still very weak. The journey might be difficult for her. Then I will come to your ranch, my wife too." We have been frantic with worry. When Sophia did not arrive on the expected day, we thought. He did not finish the sentence. "Let me close the store and get Margaret. We can leave within the hour." William waited while Samuel locked up the shop and went upstairs to fetch his wife. Margaret Vance was a petite blonde woman with a kind face and worried eyes. She thanked William profusely before they had even left town, tears running down her cheeks. The ride back to the ranch took longer with 3 people. William set a slow pace, mindful that Margaret was not an experienced rider. But eventually they arrived. William dismounted and went inside first, wanting to warn Sophia before her brother came through the door. She was still in the chair where he had left her, though she looked exhausted from simply sitting up that long. Her face brightened when she saw him, then transformed to shock and joy when Samuel burst through the door behind him. "Sophia." Samuel crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Thank God you are alive, Samuel." Sophia's voice broke. "I am sorry I worried you." "Worried? We were terrified. When you did not arrive, when days passed with no word, we thought you had been attacked by bandits or worse." Margaret came to Sophia's other side, touching her face gently. "You poor thing, you have been so ill." "I barely remember most of it," Sophia admitted. "Just William taking care of me. He saved my life." Samuel stood and turned to William, extending his hand. "I can never repay you for what you have done. Never." William shook his hand. "No payment necessary. Anyone would have done the same." "That is not true, and you know it. Many men would have left her where she lay." Samuel looked around the small house. "You cared for her here alone for 9 days." "Yes. The fever must have been terrible. It was bad," William acknowledged. "But she is strong. She fought through it." Margaret had tears on her cheeks again. "We must take her home with us, Samuel. She needs proper care. A real bed, women to attend her." William felt something twist in his chest at those words, but he kept his expression neutral. Of course they would take her to town. It was the right thing, the proper thing. She could not stay here in his small ranch house with no one but him for company. But Sophia was shaking her head. "I cannot travel yet. I can barely stand." "Then we will stay here," Margaret said immediately. "We will take care of you until you are strong enough to move." "There is not room," William said. "I only have the 1 bed." "We can sleep on the floor," Samuel said. "It does not matter. We just need to be with her." William looked at Sophia and found her looking back at him, an odd expression on her face, something like regret, maybe, or disappointment. But that made no sense. "You should go with them," William said quietly. "They are your family. They will take proper care of you." "You took proper care of me," Sophia said. "You brought me back from the edge of death. That was just keeping you alive." "Real recovery, that takes more than wet cloths and broth." "We could bring supplies here," Margaret suggested. "Food, medicine, proper bedding. If Sophia is not strong enough to travel, perhaps we could make her more comfortable here and Samuel and I could visit daily." "That seems like a lot of trouble," William said. "You spent 9 days saving my sister's life," Samuel said. "This is no trouble at all." They worked it out between them. Samuel and Margaret would return to town and come back in the morning with supplies. They would visit daily, bringing fresh food and anything else that was needed. When Sophia was strong enough to travel, they would take her to Lewiston. In the meantime, she would remain at William's ranch. After Samuel and Margaret left, the house seemed very quiet. Sophia had fallen asleep in the chair, exhausted by the emotional reunion. William carried her back to the bed, noting how light she still was, how much weight the fever had taken from her. He pulled a quilt over her and stepped back. She opened her eyes, catching him before he could leave. "William?" "Yes, thank you for going to town, for bringing my brother here. It was the right thing to do. You seem to do a lot of right things." He did not know how to respond to that, so he simply nodded and left the room. The next days fell into a new pattern. Samuel and Margaret came each morning, bringing fresh supplies and spending several hours with Sophia. William kept himself busy with ranch work during these visits, giving the family privacy. But in the evenings, after Samuel and Margaret returned to town, he would sit with Sophia and they would talk. She told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, about her parents dying of influenza 3 years ago, about her decision to come west to be closer to her only brother. She told him about the long train journey, about seeing the mountains for the first time, about the rough stagecoach ride from the railroad terminus in Boise to the stage stop, where she had purchased a horse for the final leg to Lewiston. "I thought I could make the journey in 2 days," she said. "I had no idea I was falling ill until it was too late to turn back." "You were lucky I found you," William said. "I know." She was sitting up in bed now, propped against several pillows Margaret had brought from town. She looked stronger each day, color returning to her face. "What were you doing so far from your ranch that day?" "Tracking an elk I had wounded the day before. Did not want to leave it suffering." "Did you find it?" "No, lost the trail when I found you." He paused. "It was a fair trade." Sophia smiled, and William felt something warm unfold in his chest at the sight of it. She had a beautiful smile, open and genuine. "Tell me about the war," she said suddenly. The warmth in his chest turned cold. "That is not a fit subject. You were in it, though. You are the right age. Many men were in the war, but you were there. I can see it in your eyes sometimes, a distance, a sadness." William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "Yes, I was there. Enlisted when I was 16, lied about my age, fought for 4 years. Saw things no person should see, did things no person should do. When it was over, I came west to forget." "Have you forgotten?" "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "You do not forget something like that. You just learn to live with it." "I am sorry," Sophia said softly. "I should not have asked. It is all right." He turned back to face her. "It was a long time ago, but it did not feel like a long time ago. Sometimes it felt like yesterday." A week after Samuel's first visit, Sophia was strong enough to walk around the house with assistance. William offered his arm, and she leaned on him as they made slow circuits of the main room. She was wearing a different dress now, one Margaret had brought from town, a simple blue calico that brought out the darkness of her eyes. "The doctor came with Samuel yesterday," she said as they walked. "He said I am recovering well. That is good news. He said I should be able to travel to town within another week, perhaps less." "That is good," William said and tried to mean it. Sophia stopped walking and looked up at him. "Is it good? You will be glad to have your house back to yourself." "I did not say that. But you must be eager for things to return to normal. I have disrupted your entire life." William looked down at her, at the way the lamplight caught in her dark hair, at the curve of her cheek, at the earnestness in her expression. And he realized with sudden, complete certainty that he did not want things to return to normal. He did not want her to leave. He wanted her to stay here in his house, filling the empty spaces he had not even known existed. But he could not say that. It would be inappropriate, presumptuous. She was a lady, and he was just a rancher living alone in the wilderness. She had a life waiting for her in Lewiston with her brother and his wife. She had no reason to stay. "You have not disrupted anything," he said finally. "It has been good having someone here. Good." She was still looking up at him, and there was something in her eyes he could not quite name. "That is all. What else would you have me say?" "I do not know, I just thought." She shook her head. "Never mind, I am tired. Can you help me back to bed?" He helped her back to the bedroom, confused by the exchange. Had he said something wrong? Failed to say something she expected? Women were a mystery to him. He had not spent significant time around a woman since before the war, since his mother died when he was 14. He did not understand their ways of talking, the meanings hidden beneath the words. That night he lay on the floor in the main room, staring up at the dark ceiling. In the other room, he could hear Sophia's quiet breathing. Soon she would be gone. Soon his house would be empty again. The thought was unbearable. 2 days later, Margaret came to visit alone. Samuel had to mind the store, she explained. She brought a basket of food and a new quilt she had made. After greeting Sophia, she turned to William. "May I speak with you outside?" William followed her out to the porch, wondering what she wanted. Margaret stood looking out at the hills for a moment before speaking. "Sophia will be leaving soon," she said. "I know. She will come to live with us in town. We have a spare room and she will help with the housework and the store." "That sounds like a good arrangement." "It is." Margaret turned to face him, "But I do not think it is what she wants." William felt his heartbeat quicken. "What do you mean?" "Oh, come now, you are not blind. Surely you have noticed the way she looks at you." "I do not know what you are talking about." Margaret laughed softly. "Men, you truly are oblivious. She has fallen in love with you, William Jonas, and unless I am very much mistaken, you have fallen in love with her too." "That is ridiculous. I barely know her. You spent 9 days keeping her alive. You watched over her day and night, and now you have spent another week in her company, talking with her every evening. Samuel tells me you watch her when you think no one is looking. He says he has never seen a man more besotted." William felt heat rise in his face. "She is a lady. I am just a rancher. You are a good man with your own land. That is more than many men can claim. She deserves better than this." He gestured at the small house, the rough barn, the empty prairie stretching away in all directions. "She deserves a real life in town with society and comfort." "Why do you not let her decide what she deserves?" Margaret said gently. "Ask her, William. Tell her how you feel. The worst she can do is say no. The worst she can do is say yes and then regret it for the rest of her life. Or she could say yes and be happy. Are you willing to lose her without even trying?" Margaret went back inside, leaving William standing on the porch with his thoughts in turmoil. Was it true? Did Sophia have feelings for him? He thought back over the past days, trying to read meaning into glances and words. The way she smiled when he entered the room. The way she always wanted to know where he had been when he came back from working. The disappointment in her voice when she talked about leaving. He was still standing there when the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, he could hear Margaret laughing at something Sophia said. The sound of women's voices in his house, the warmth and life they brought. He had not realized how lonely he had been until Sophia arrived and showed him what he was missing. That evening, after Margaret left, William sat with Sophia as usual. She was in the chair by the window now, strong enough to sit up for hours at a time. Soon she would be strong enough to ride a horse. Soon she would be gone. "Margaret said something interesting today," Sophia said. William felt his stomach tighten. "What did she say?" "She said I should not be so quick to leave, that I should consider staying here for a while longer." "You are welcome to stay as long as you want," William said carefully. You are not just being polite. I am not much for politeness. If I say something, I mean it." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What if I wanted to stay permanently?" William's breath caught. "What?" "What if I wanted to stay here on this ranch with you?" "Sophia, you cannot mean that." "Why not?" She turned in her chair to face him directly. "You saved my life, William. For 9 days you took care of me, asking nothing in return. And these past weeks, talking with you, getting to know you, I have realized something. I do not want to live in town. I do not want to be a burden on my brother and his wife. I want to be here. You do not know what you are saying. You have been ill. You are not thinking clearly. I am thinking more clearly than I have in years. She stood, crossing the room to where he sat. I see the way you look at me. I see the loneliness in your eyes. You want me to stay, William. Why will you not admit it? Because you would regret it, he said, his voice rough. This life, this place, it is hard, lonely. You deserve better. What I deserve is to make my own choices, and I choose this, I choose you. She reached out and took his hand. Unless you do not want me, if that is the case, tell me now, and I will leave and never speak of it again. William looked down at their joined hands, her small fingers wrapped around his calloused palm. He thought about the empty years behind him, and the empty years ahead if he let her go. He thought about the war, about all the death he had seen, and how she represented life, hope, a future he had stopped believing in. I want you to stay, he said quietly. I have wanted it since the moment you woke and asked my name, but I'm afraid. Of what? Of failing you. Of not being enough. Sophia moved closer, and he stood automatically, ingrained manners making him rise in the presence of a lady. She looked up at him, so close now he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. You are enough, she said. You are more than enough. You are everything. William reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. Her skin was soft, warm, alive. He lowered his head and kissed her, gentle and careful, terrified of breaking this perfect moment. She leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, and kissed him back with a sweetness that made his heart ache. When they finally pulled apart, William rested his forehead against hers and released a shaky breath. I love you, he said. I did not mean to, did not want to. But I do. I love you too, Sophia whispered. From the moment I woke and saw you sitting beside me, so exhausted and worried, I knew then that I was safe, that I was home. This is not much of a home. It is perfect. She pulled back enough to look at him. If you will have me, I want to stay. I want to build a life here with you. Your brother will have objections. My brother will understand, she smiled. Margaret already does. I think she planned this. William laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he had laughed? She tried to convince me to tell you how I felt. Said I was being foolish. She was right. She usually is, I expect. They stood there together as the last light faded from the sky, holding each other, letting the reality of what had just happened settle over them. William felt something he had not felt in years, maybe since before the war. Peace. Contentment. Joy. The next morning, Samuel and Margaret arrived together. They took one look at William and Sophia, at the way they stood close together, at the happiness radiating from both of them, and Margaret actually clapped her hands together. I knew it, she said triumphantly. I told you, Samuel. I told you they were perfect for each other. Samuel looked between his sister and William, his expression serious. Is this what you want, Sophia? Truly, it is, Sophia said firmly. More than anything. You have known him less than 3 weeks. I know everything I need to know. He is a good man. He saved my life, and I love him. Samuel turned to William. Do you love her? I do, William said, with everything I am. Will you marry her properly? Take care of her? I will. You have my word. Samuel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right then. But we do this right. A proper courtship, a proper wedding. I will not have anyone in town saying my sister was improper. No one would dare, Margaret said. Everyone knows she was deathly ill. William saved her life. If anything, people will think it is romantic. Romance is all well and good, Samuel said, but reputation matters too. So they did it properly. Sophia moved into town to stay with Samuel and Margaret, though it felt like tearing out a piece of his heart when William watched her ride away. But he courted her correctly, calling on her at the store 3 times a week, taking her on chaperoned walks along the river, attending church with her on Sundays. The town found it all terribly romantic, just as Margaret had predicted. The story of the cowboy who found a dying woman and nursed her back to health for 9 days spread through Lewiston like wildfire. Women sighed over it. Men clapped William on the back and told him he was a lucky man. And through it all, William counted the days until the wedding. They were married 6 weeks after Sophia first woke and asked his name. The ceremony took place in the small church in Lewiston, with what seemed like half the town in attendance. Sophia wore a white dress that Margaret and some of the other ladies had sewn together, and she was so beautiful that William forgot to breathe when he saw her walking down the aisle. Samuel gave her away, though William could see it was difficult for him. But there was no disapproval in his eyes now, only happiness for his sister. The preacher spoke words about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage. William barely heard them. He was too focused on Sophia, on the way her hand trembled slightly in his, on the tears of joy in her eyes. "I do," he said when the preacher asked if he would take this woman. "I do," Sophia echoed, her voice clear and strong. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and William kissed her there in front of everyone, a proper, chaste kiss that still managed to make his heart race. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing that went on into the evening. William danced with his new wife, holding her close, amazed that this was real, that she had chosen him, that they had a whole life ahead of them together. When they finally left, riding back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Sophia leaned against him in the saddle and sighed happily. "Take me home, husband." "Home," William repeated, loving the sound of the word. For so long, the ranch had been just a place to live, to work, to pass the time. Now it was truly a home. That first night as man and wife, William was nervous. He had never been with a woman before, and he was afraid of doing something wrong, of hurting her or disappointing her. But Sophia was patient and gentle, and there was so much love between them that everything else fell into place. Afterward, lying together in the darkness with her head on his chest, William felt complete in a way he never had before. All the broken pieces inside him, all the damage from the war, seemed to fade in the presence of her love. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what? For not dying, for waking up, for asking my name." Sophia lifted her head to look at him, her hand coming up to touch his face. "Thank you for finding me, for taking care of me, for being brave enough to love me. I am not brave. You are the bravest man I know." Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sophia adapted to the work with surprising ease. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to tend the vegetable garden William helped her plant, to feed the chickens and collect eggs. She helped him with the cattle, learning to ride properly, to rope, to do the 100 small tasks that ranching required. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk about their days, their plans, their dreams. William told her more about the war, about the things that still haunted him sometimes. She listened without judgment, holding his hand, letting him work through the old pain at his own pace. And slowly, gradually, the nightmares that had plagued him for years began to fade. Sophia told him about her childhood, about her parents, about the brother she loved who had gone west seeking opportunity. She told him about the loneliness she had felt after their parents died, how she had felt adrift in the world with no anchor, and how finding him, being saved by him, had given her a new purpose. "I think I was meant to get that fever," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "It sounds strange, I know, but if I had not fallen ill, if you had not found me, we never would have met." "I would rather you had not nearly died," William said, "but would you trade it?" If you could go back and change things, have us meet some other way, would you? William thought about those 9 days, about the fear and the exhaustion and the desperate hope. About sitting beside her bed, replacing wet cloths, praying she would survive. And he thought about her waking up, asking his name, looking at him with those dark eyes that saw straight into his soul. "No," he said finally, "I would not change it. Those 9 days were the most important of my life." Sophia smiled and leaned against him. "Mine too." The first winter came, and with it, the harsh Idaho cold. But the house was warm, and they had plenty of supplies, and William had never been happier. They spent long evenings by the fire, Sophia sewing or reading while William worked on mending tack or carving small items from wood. Sometimes they just talked about everything and nothing, the easy conversation of two people completely comfortable with each other. In the spring, Sophia told him she was pregnant. William felt joy and terror in equal measure. Joy at the thought of a child, of their family growing. Terror that something would go wrong, that he would lose her the way he had almost lost her to the fever. But Sophia was strong, and the pregnancy progressed smoothly. Margaret came to stay at the ranch in the final weeks, and Samuel visited often. And on a warm September evening, exactly 1 year after William had found Sophia lying in the prairie grass, she gave birth to their daughter. They named her Hope, because that was what she represented. Hope for the future, hope for happiness, hope for a life unmarred by the darkness of the past. William held his daughter for the first time and felt tears stream down his face. This tiny, perfect human was his and Sophia's, a living symbol of their love. "She is beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you," Sophia said, exhausted but smiling. "She looks like you. She looks like both of us." Sophia reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand. Our miracle. The years passed, each one better than the last. Hope grew from infant to toddler to a bright, curious child who followed William everywhere, asking endless questions about the ranch and the animals and everything else in her small world. 2 years after Hope, they had a son they named James, and 3 years after that, another daughter, Elizabeth. The ranch prospered under William's careful management and Sophia's hard work. They expanded the herd, built a bigger barn, added rooms onto the house. Samuel and Margaret visited often, and their own children played with William and Sophia's, cousins growing up together on the Idaho frontier. Sometimes, William would stand on the porch in the evening, watching Sophia play with the children in the yard, and marvel at how much his life had changed. He thought about that day 14 years ago when he had found a dying woman in the grass. How close he had come to riding past, to missing her entirely. How his entire future had hinged on tracking a wounded elk that particular day in that particular direction. Fate, perhaps, or luck, or divine intervention. Whatever it was, he was grateful for it every single day. On the 14th anniversary of the day they met, William took Sophia back to the place where he had found her. It took some searching to locate the exact spot, but he finally found it, the cluster of cottonwoods near a small creek. They stood together in the prairie grass, holding hands. "I thought you were dead when I first saw you," William said. "You were so still, so pale. And you saved me anyway. Could not leave you to die." "You did more than save my life," Sophia said, turning to face him. "You gave me a reason to live. You gave me love, a home, a family. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you." "We owe it to each other," William said. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. I was dead inside before I found you, Sophia, going through the motions of living but not really alive. You woke me up. And you cooled my fever with wet cloths for 9 days, waiting for me to wake so you could learn my name." They kissed there in the prairie grass, under the same sky that had witnessed their beginning. And then they rode home together, back to the ranch, back to their children, back to the life they had built from a chance encounter and 9 days of desperate hope. Hope grew into a strong, capable young woman who loved the ranch as much as her father did. She eventually married a young man from town, a carpenter named David Miller, and they built a house on the far edge of William and Sophia's property. James went to college in Boise, studying agriculture, and returned to help expand the ranch operations. Elizabeth became a teacher in Lewiston, just like her mother had once dreamed of being. William and Sophia grew old together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming gnarled from years of work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and shared challenges, and the profound knowledge that they were meant to be together. On quiet evenings, when the children were grown and gone to their own lives, William and Sophia would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, just as they had done for decades. They did not need to talk much anymore. After so many years together, they could communicate with just a look, a touch, a smile. "You ever regret it?" William asked one evening. "Giving up the life you could have had in town, choosing this instead?" Sophia looked at him with those same dark eyes that had captured his heart so many years ago. "Not for a single moment. This life, this place, it is everything I ever wanted. I just did not know it until that fever brought me to you." 9 days, William said softly. 9 days I sat beside you, cooling your fever, begging you to live. Best 9 days I ever spent. And then I woke asking for your name, and you gave it to me. William Jonas, the man who saved my life and stole my heart. "I love you," William said. "After all these years, after everything we have been through, I love you more now than the day we married." "I love you too," Sophia replied. "My cowboy, my savior, my husband, my everything." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the Idaho sky in shades of gold and crimson. And in that perfect moment, William thought back to a young man of 32, lonely and lost, who had found a dying woman in the prairie grass and changed both their lives forever. He would not change a single thing. The years continued their steady march, and William and Sophia remained on their ranch, now surrounded by children, grandchildren, and eventually even a few great-grandchildren. The house had been expanded several more times, rooms added to accommodate family gatherings where the whole clan would come together for holidays and celebrations. Samuel and Margaret grew old alongside them, still running the general store in Lewiston until their own son took it over. The four of them remained close friends throughout their lives, often laughing about how Margaret had been the one to push both William and Sophia into admitting their feelings all those years ago. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Lewiston threw them a celebration. It was held in the newly built community hall, and nearly everyone in town came to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a local legend. Young couples would ask them for advice, wanting to know the secret to a long and happy marriage. "No secret," William would say. "Just love each other, work hard together, and never forget why you chose each other in the first place. And be willing to cool each other's fevers," Sophia would add with a smile, both the literal and the metaphorical ones. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations. Hope's son eventually took over the main operations, working the land his grandfather had tamed, raising cattle on the same hills where William had once tracked an elk and found his destiny. When William was 79 years old, in the winter of 1929, he took ill. It was nothing like the fever that had nearly claimed Sophia all those years ago, but rather the slow decline of a body that had worked hard for too many years. Sophia tended him with the same dedication he had shown her, sitting beside his bed, holding his hand, talking to him through the long nights. "You cannot leave me yet," she told him one evening, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "We have more years together. We have more sunsets to watch." "We have had a lifetime of sunsets," William said, his voice weak but his eyes still bright when he looked at her. "More than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me that, Sophia. You gave me a life worth living." "You gave me life itself," she countered. 9 days with wet cloths, remember. "You brought me back from death. And you brought me back from a different kind of death, the death of the soul, of hope, of joy." He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had. "I love you, have loved you from the moment you opened your eyes and asked my name." "William Jonas," she whispered. "The best name I ever learned." He rallied for a few more weeks, long enough to see all his children and grandchildren one last time, to hold his great-grandchildren, to say his goodbyes. And then, on a cold February morning with fresh snow covering the ground, William passed peacefully in his sleep with Sophia beside him. The funeral was one of the largest Lewiston had ever seen. People came from all over Idaho, people whose lives William and Sophia had touched over the decades. The young couples they had advised, the neighbors they had helped, the community they had served. They laid him to rest in the Lewiston Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree that reminded Sophia of the cluster of trees where their story had begun. Sophia lived another 5 years without him, staying on the ranch with Hope and her family. She remained active and engaged, playing with great-grandchildren, helping in the garden, sitting on the porch in the evenings. But there was a sadness in her eyes that had not been there before, a loneliness that nothing could quite fill. "I miss him," she told Hope one spring evening. "Every moment of every day I miss him." "I know, Mama," Hope said, hugging her mother, "but you will see him again. And until then you have all of us. I know, and I am grateful for that." Sophia looked out at the hills, at the land William had worked so hard to build into something lasting. "We had such a good life together, 52 years of marriage, and I loved every single day of it. Even the hard days, the difficult times, they were worth it because we faced them together." In the spring of 1934, on a warm April afternoon, Sophia sat on the porch and watched her great-grandchildren playing in the yard. She was 81 years old, and she felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. It was the tiredness of a life fully lived, of a journey nearing its end. She thought about that day in 1882, when she had ridden out from Boise toward Lewiston, unaware that fever was already burning through her body. She thought about falling from her horse, about lying in the grass feeling death approaching. And she thought about waking to find a stranger sitting beside her bed, exhausted and worried, having spent 9 days keeping her alive. "What is your name?" she had asked, such a simple question. But the answer had changed everything. William Jonas, the man who saved her life. The man who became her husband, her partner, her love. The father of her children, the grandfather of her grandchildren. The man who turned a lonely ranch house into a home filled with laughter and love. She closed her eyes, feeling the warm sun on her face, and let herself drift. And in her mind she saw him clearly, not as the old man he had been at the end, but as the young cowboy he had been when they met. Lean and weathered, with kind eyes and gentle hands, standing beside her bed, holding a wet cloth, waiting for her to wake. "William," she whispered. And he was there, reaching out his hand to her. "Ready to come home, my love?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I am ready." Hope found her a short time later, sitting peacefully in her chair with a smile on her face. They buried her next to William, under that same cottonwood tree, and the entire family gathered to say goodbye to the woman who had been the heart of their family. On her headstone, Beneath her name and dates, they carved a simple phrase. She woke asking for his name and found her home. The ranch continued for generations after them, a testament to what they had built together. And in Lewiston, elderly couples still told the story of the cowboy and the woman with the fever, of 9 days that led to a lifetime, of a chance encounter that became a legendary love. Because in the end, that was what it was. Not just a story of survival, though it was certainly that. Not just a story of the Wild West, though it captured that era perfectly. It was a story of love in its purest form, the kind of love that saves lives, that builds homes, that creates legacies. The kind of love that starts with 9 days of wet cloths and a simple question, "What is your name?" and an answer that changed 2 lives forever. William Jonas. In the years that followed, the family kept the story alive, passing it down through the generations. Great-great-grandchildren who never met William or Sophia still knew their story, still understood that the ranch they lived on, the life they enjoyed, had all begun with a cowboy cooling a fever and a woman who woke asking for his name. The house where it all happened was preserved, kept in good repair by successive generations. The bedroom where Sophia had lain unconscious for 9 days, where she had recovered, where she and William had spent thousands of nights together, became something of a family shrine. A reminder of where they came from, of the love that had started it all. On summer evenings, when the whole family gathered at the ranch, the youngest children would sit on the porch and ask to hear the story again. And the oldest members of the family would tell it, embellishing here and there as family stories do, but always keeping the heart of it true. A cowboy named William Jonas, tracking a wounded elk across the Idaho prairie in September of 1882. A woman named Sophia Vance, traveling to join her brother in Lewiston, struck down by fever. 9 days of desperate care, of wet cloths and cold water, of prayers and hope, and a simple question asked upon waking. "What is your name?" From that question came everything else. A courtship, a marriage, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren stretching down through the decades. A ranch that prospered, a family that grew, a love that never dimmed even when death finally parted them. The cottonwood trees still grew near the spot where William found Sophia, though the original trees had long since died and been replaced by their own descendants. The creek still ran cold and clear, and sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light was just right, you could almost see them there. A young cowboy and a young woman, standing together in the prairie grass, beginning a journey that would last 52 years and create a legacy that would last forever. This was the Wild West, harsh and unforgiving, where survival was never guaranteed and death lurked around every corner. But it was also a place where love could bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, where a chance encounter could lead to a lifetime of happiness, where 9 days of caring for a stranger could transform into 52 years of devotion. William and Sophia's story became more than just family legend. It became part of Lewiston's history, part of Idaho's story, part of the larger narrative of the American West. Books were written about them, articles published, their photographs displayed in the local historical society. Not because they were famous or powerful or wealthy, but because their love story touched something universal in the human heart, the belief that somewhere out there, in the vast randomness of the universe, there is someone meant for us. And if we are very, very lucky, our paths will cross at exactly the right moment. Even if that moment happens to involve a life-threatening fever and 9 days of wet cloths. The ranch still operates today, now in its 7th generation of family ownership. The descendants of William and Sophia continue to work the land, raise cattle, watch the Idaho sunsets from that same porch. And every September, on the anniversary of the day William found Sophia in the prairie grass, the family gathers to remember and to celebrate. They toast to the cowboy and the woman with the fever, to 9 days that changed 2 lives, to a question and an answer that started it all. What is your name, William Jonas? And in the eternal way that love transcends time and death, somewhere beyond the sunset, they are together still. Walking hand in hand through golden prairie grass, beneath an endless sky, living in the home they built together. A home not made of wood and stone, but of love and devotion and 52 years of choosing each other, every single day. This is their story. The cowboy and the fever, the wet cloths and the waiting, the waking and the asking. A story that began in desperation and ended in joy. A story of the Wild West, of Idaho territory, of a time when life was hard but love made it bearable. Most of all, it is a story of hope. Hope that love can be found in the darkest moments. Hope that caring for a stranger can lead to a lifetime of happiness. Hope that asking a simple question can reveal the answer to everything you have been searching for. What is your name? 3 words that echo through generations, carrying with them the weight of a love story for the ages. A love that started with fever and wet cloths, that grew through hardship and joy, that lasted until death and beyond. William Jonas and Sophia Vance, a cowboy and a woman who nearly died. 9 days that led to forever. This is their legacy, preserved in the memories of their descendants, in the ranch they built together, in the love that still lives on in every couple who hears their story and dares to hope for the same. They found each other in the wilderness, in the midst of death and danger, and they built something beautiful, something lasting, something that would outlive them both and inspire generations yet to come. And it all started with wet cloths, a fever, 9 days of waiting, and a woman who woke asking for a name. The name that would become her whole world, William Jonas. And his answer to her unspoken question, the one that came later after the fever broke and the strength returned and the love blossomed. Will you stay with me? Yes, forever. A promise kept through 52 years of marriage, through children and grandchildren, through hardship and triumph, through the building of a legacy that would last generations. A promise that death itself could not break, because true love never really ends. It just transforms, moving from the physical world into the realm of memory and spirit, where it continues to inspire and guide those who come after. The ranch stands as testament to their love. The family that bears their name carries their legacy forward. And the story, that beautiful, heartbreaking, uplifting story of fever and wet cloths and a cowboy who would not let a stranger die, continues to be told. Because some stories are too important to forget, some loves too powerful to fade, some legacies too precious to lose. William Jonas and Sophia Vance. Their names are carved in stone, yes, but more importantly, they are carved into the heart of everyone who hears their story and believes, even for a moment, in the power of love to transform lives. 9 days of wet cloths. One question asked upon waking. 52 years of devotion. A legacy that will last forever. This is their story, complete and whole. A love story of the Wild West that proves what we all hope to be true. That love can find us in our darkest hour, that caring for others can transform our own lives, that sometimes the fever that nearly kills us can lead us to exactly where we were meant to be. With exactly who we were meant to be with, forever.